What's up people? Welcome back to a third episode on the Roadtripper build. So last episode we tackled the inside of the car. We started putting the 3M mats in place to keep the noise in the car down a little bit. I've got a bunch of new stuff that I'm going to combine with a little bit of old stuff. I'll explain in a second. That needs to go into this car and then the front end is done. I'll show you what we have. So right here, this is the subframe that I bought from the 528i. So why do I keep it? Because all these steering components, as you can see, they are nice and fresh. And these are the ones I'm going to put into the car. So this whole steering assembly, I'm going to loosen from this subframe and move it over to this one. So this is a subframe that I have reinforced the steering box mount on. Because this, as you can see, is a very thin bracket that is prone to breaking. So I prevented that now with a large metal piece that goes through the subframe, welded it in place, and then the whole thing is powder coated, nice and fresh. It's a lot nicer to be working on this kind of parts than this rusty junk. Then here I have two sets of front suspension arms. And I have a third one that's still in the car. And I'm basically going to take out these ones as well and then compare all three sets to see which arms I can still use, which one are junk. And then I'm going to make basically one good set out of them. The reason I didn't buy this new is because some of these I actually bought new like 2 or 3 years ago for my first car. And they have very little miles on them. So I was thinking of reusing them if they're still in good shape. So I'm gonna start off with taking the old suspension out of this car so that we can compare everything easily. So the suspension on an E28 really is not that complicated. So we basically have the strut that holds the shock and the spring, and on that is connected the hub. And then we have basically two arms. So this is the front suspension arm, the rear suspension arm, that are connected to the subframe. Well, the front one is connected to the subframe, the rear one to the chassis. And then we have the steering arm right here. And this is the sway bar mount that is connected to the strut. We're gonna take out the strut first, because that's quite easy. So we have to disconnect the brake lines, disconnect the 3 nuts on top of the strut tower, and then these 3 bolts down here, they are 17 mil, I believe. See these 3, and if you take those 3 out, the strut basically is loose from the rest of the suspension, and then we can lift that out of the way, and then it's a lot easier to reach the rest of the suspension. So, those are tight. You need to loosen our sway bar link, and you basically on the front you have to put a wrench. Alright, it's also 17, but I only have one 17, so I'm gonna do an adjustable wrench. You just have to be a little bit careful that you don't damage the rubber boot. Basically completely loose from the bottom. Just going to give it a tap right here, so this part separates, because they can like be rusted together a little bit. So that is the front struts removed. And now, as you can see, we have a lot better access to the rest of the suspension. So the front sway bar with the link I'm going to leave in for now. I forgot to get this powder coated as well, but it's not that bad of an issue. Next time I will powder coat stuff, I will put one of these in with the rest. And this link I've checked, there's no play in them, so I'm gonna leave this in for now. You might be thinking, why am I cheaping out on a little bit of stuff like that? Also the suspension arms. I'm not cheaping out on them, I'm just very aware of my budget. And there's a lot of other things that need to happen to this car that are more important than renewing those. So I'd rather spend the money on something else. I don't have unlimited funds, so that will surely be renewed in the future, but that's not a priority. So I'm now going to disconnect the steering assembly from the subframe. Alright, so now all of that stuff is out of the way. And we're gonna move on to the subframe itself. So the last thing that we need to ditch from the subframe before removing it is our steering box. It is held in with this bolt right here onto this bracket, and then there's a long bolt, you can see it right there, that goes all the way through. I was thinking how I'm gonna do it, because usually if I want to take the steering box out, you have to remove these joints at the back as well, and they are usually very stuck. So I haven't tried yet to see if they are loose, but then I spotted that the hole in the firewall, there should be a rubber there to seal it off, and it's not on there, so I have to take it apart anyway. So I'm gonna start off by removing these bolts, slide those out, and then see if, because these bolts on these joints have also been removed, so maybe they come out easy, probably not. But yeah, then we're taking off the steering box, and then I'm going to clean it a little bit, pressure wash it, so at least some of the grease is off, and then we can continue with a clean surface. Looks like our steering box isn't stuck anymore, so I'm gonna see if we can get it out. Quite heavy unit. We can pry these joints open a little bit, smacking the screwdriver in there. That can release some of the pressure that's on there. Oh, wow, as you can see, there's a massive amount of play in here. Yeah, we'll definitely be replacing that with another one. That's not okay. Okay, so with the steering box out of the way, it's onto the subframe. Just 2 bolts on each side, and then that's out. If you're wondering why it's so dark in here, I'm working in here with the hood closed. Because, well, I can't open the hood when the bridge is, when the car is in the air, because that's too high and it's going to hit the ceiling. So now that the subframe is removed, you can see on the underside of here, it's not really rust, it's like more of a residue from something. So I'm gonna clean that off a little bit with a sponge. I don't really have the good tools to do that without taking off the paint underneath, and I don't want to do that. So I'm just going to do with a sponge, some soap, some water, and then maybe with a scuff pad, and maybe clean the threads out a little bit, and then we're gonna put on the fresh subframe. So there's a little bit change of plans concerning these subframe mounts. So I just went over it with a scuff pad, probably much too much light, and I'm already down to bare metal. So that's obviously not good when I'm going to mount the subframe. Moisture is going to get in there and it's going to start to rust. So I'm going to go over it with the grinder, with a flap disc, just to really make it all clean, and then just put a little layer of paint on it so that it's protected before we mount the subframe. In the meanwhile, while that is drying, I'm going to start taking off the fenders and the front skirt. The reason I'm taking those off is because at first I thought I was just going to fill in these dents, but I'm just immediately going to put on 2 other fenders that are clean, and then that is sorted. Also this front skirt I'm going to change out because yeah, these dents in here. So this doesn't really belong into this video, but since I have to wait for the paint now, which wasn't planned, I'm just going to do this while it's drying, and then we can move on to the subframe again. I'm just showing you a very quick time lapse on this process, because I've done this in depth a couple times now on this channel. If you want to see the in-depth video on this, I'll put a link in the top right corner right now. Okay, we're back. So I painted the underside, as you can see, just nice and black. Now it's not going to rust, which is nice. I'm going to let it dry a couple more hours before I put the subframe on. So in the meantime, I took off the fenders, and basically I forgot to mention, the main reason I wanted to take this off is because there was like the slightest amount of rust at this corner right here, as you can see. And I really wanted to know what was behind it. So you can see it's nothing too bad, just some surface rust. It will need attention, obviously, but yeah, it's really not bad. Just going to go over it with a wire brush, make sure everything's gone, put a rust preventer on it, and then some sealant, and we're good to go. Same goes for here, like a little bit of surface rust, but nothing major. So here you can see clean metal. Just going to clean all of that up. On the other side, pretty much the same story. So a little bit on this edge, and yeah, on some points right here. Again, nothing major. The only thing that I did notice is here, it's a little bit of rust in that in the hinge from the door. So I don't know how bad it is, but yeah, it seems to be just to be surface rust. A bit in an annoying spot, but yeah, that's fine. So overall, I'm really happy that there's no major rust behind there. That means that we'll be able to go on with the project without having to weld on the chassis, which is a huge thing for me.
Approximately 10 hours later.
Here we are again next morning. So I decided to let the paint dry the entire night because it's really cold out, so that makes the curing process even longer. So now we are ready to put on the fresh powder coated subframe. Then I'm gonna put on that set of arms just so the car can stand on its wheels. And then we're going to put in those struts. Don't mind the rusty brake discs, I've got new ones on the way. Now I'm gonna lower it down with the other springs. There are, I believe, lowering springs. So let's see how much the car has dropped. Still hasn't got an engine, but with the previous springs on there, it was really high. So let's see if it's better like this. Then I'm gonna roll it just outside the garage and pressure wash the engine bay. And also the inside of the fenders. So that's all a bit nice and clean. Now I did forget because I've pulled off the fenders, so it's really hard to get an impression of how high it sits. So, but yeah, it will be better anyway. Okay guys, we washed the engine bay a little bit. It's not perfect. As you can see, still a lot of grime and stuff left, but it's already a lot better. And for me it's good enough for putting stuff back in for now. The engine bay will also be painted at some point, but also not yet. That's in the second stage of the car. What I'm going to do, I think, is I noticed that under the ABS pump there's quite a bit of surface rust. And to prevent that from becoming real rust, I think I'm going to take out the ABS pump, take out all the brake lines, because I'm going to replace some of them anyway. All of this is going out as well, so I have much better access to everything. And then that needs to be treated, but that's going to be for another video. I actually think that this is going to be end of this video. We've put the fresh subframe in, the other, well, partially refurbished struts with new bearings and all that stuff. Then hopefully in a couple of weeks we can change out those lower arms for new ones, together with powder coated front sway bar and all those little parts, and that is finished. Yeah, so that's it for this video. Next video is probably going to be the rear subframe. So everything came in, I have the subframes, and we're going to build that up, and that's going to be the next video. Thank you for watching.